All right.
Let's go.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another exciting episode of Meet The. I'm Troy Rawlings, your host for this show. And today we have one of the young guns of the literary arena, exciting author, fun dude, and a foodie after my own heart. My man, Mr. Elijah Douresseau. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Troy. It's a pleasure. Excited to get into it.
So y'all don't see all the behind the scenes stuff that goes on. We know we're gonna turn. We've actually Tarantino this interview twice.
That's right. That's Tarantino-esque.
That's Tarantino-esque. Bling, ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
You see something crazy happening. How are you, Matt? So, all right. To get this underway, I have to mention his two book titles, because I'll mention them, but usually I'm good at remembering a book title. His book titles are already movie titles. So it's going to be an easy transition. Fiction writer, these two fiction books, one-offs, specific characters. His first book was Chalkboard Specials for Those Who Need Shelter Inside. Second book, The Nasty Business of a Bodyguard. The Nasty Business of a Bodyguard, that just sounds like it's a movie anyway. That sounds like, plus with the movies out, with the hitman's.
Yeah, hitman's wife's bodyguard, yeah.
I love it. So first off, where are you from originally? Let people know where you're from.
Yeah, so Cali boy, city boy, LA, till I die, it seems at this point. Grew up in South Central. And yeah, pretty much that was it. And then I went to college out of state in Colorado. And then came back here and have been living in the San Fernando Valley ever since.
How'd you like Colorado?
It was awesome. We were talking off camera a little bit about like how much LA, California, we can only really experience, especially LA proper, only really experiences like one season for the most part. So I went to a place that had all of them, and that was kind of it. Like Cali, you're next to the beaches, but I really wanted to be in a place that like knew mountains, not hills, but like mountains, the Rockies. And that paired with I love Western literature. The writing program was great, and the near full ride didn't hurt either. So it's like I'm
full ride, a little braggadocious. Yeah. Let's get that. You got a full ride scholarship, academic writing. What was your scholarship based on?
So it was mostly full. It was 95% funded, which was great. And then between other scholarships that I got, that was more than like paid for school, out of pocket. So yeah, right. It's
that's what we do, the genius.
Right. This is the thing with margins, but I was grateful that they were on board for that. So yeah, I did English, creative writing. That was my major and my track. And then I minored in feminist and gender studies.
Feminist and gender studies?
Yeah. That was one of those things where it's like,
just get you guessing, he is married.
Yeah.
Wonderful wife. So
that might have helped me get married, to be honest with you. But yeah.
Every now and then you're like, you know what? Oh,
yeah.
I'm going to be quiet.
Yeah.
It's like,
right.
So we talked about earlier, newlywed, but okay, this is something key. You knew, and I want people to hear this because myself included, I knew I had a love for writing. My teachers told me in high school I was gifted in writing. My first teacher to tell me I was gifted in writing was the girls told me I was gifted because of the poems.
Hey.
But my first teacher to tell me I was gifted was my 12th grade English teacher in my theater arts, and she was the one to help me get into writing creatively. But sometimes we don't hear it. We hear it from certain people, but when you're writing, it's like subjective. But you knew from a young age. How did you say you were when you realized writing is it?
First grade, around 6. Yeah. So it was telling Troy it was monster truck driving, from like 0 to like 5, just because of my TV tenure, just watching all that, Power Rangers, all that stuff. So that translated to monster truck driving somehow.
No. I don't know if I ever told you. You mentioned monster truck driving, and I have one of the greatest experiences with my dad. He took me to the Baltimore, well, at the time it was the Baltimore Civic Center,
Mm.
myself, and they would have, we could go there and see wrestling matches, but also the monster truck show. So I went to the first monster truck show, and I go, and he said, "I'm gonna go get some food." It's like, all right, and we're sitting up, and I was like, all those seats down there, nobody's sitting up front. So I go all the way down to the front, realizing that there's a reason at monster truck shows the first 15 rows or so are empty.
No way.
So I go down and I'm up front, dirt, fence,
Right.
dirt.
Yeah.
And they start, and I think it was Gravedigger and Bigfoot. And they started.
Yeah. High octane from the start. Yeah.
I'm like, I couldn't hear anything. It was so crazy. The fire up. And I feel, and my father's like,
yeah.
like, as we walked up, I heard him saying, "Man, you can't hear nothing down there." I was
Right.
like, I'm greatest, one of the funniest, greatest. The rest of the show was great, but that was the funniest thing ever because I'm in my own world. I think how Zoe, my daughter, is sometimes with headphones on. But when each time you say monster truck, I think about that time with my dad. And
see, that's crazy. That's crazy because you were ahead of me because I've never been to a monster truck show in my life. So that was funny enough. That's a sign that I'm like a writer, or at least have a creative mind, that I just thought that like that's something that I could do. Just because I certainly saw it on television and I knew of it. But as far as this like very like intellectual, like whimsical experience as a child, like that seems something that like that would be pushing for the fences and amazing. So
never been to a monster truck show.
No, that was just my mind working.
Just letting y'all know that's the thing. Have them go to one of those and be like, "I can't hear."
Right.
So you start this journey of writing and whatever that meant. What did writing do to you? Where did it take you? Because at 5 and 6, that means you're up. I remember writing that young, but now watching my daughter write stories, I'm of the mindset to encourage her now in elementary school.
Yeah, it's incredible because I think that is interesting. That I think developmentally, a lot of kids do have that phase of growing up, which is awesome. Is that like you were surrounded by, and I can't even speak for the kids now because I feel like it's crazy the amount of just information and stories that they have. But regardless, there's so many of us that are surrounded by these magical stories growing up, and you figure like, hey, I want to participate in that. And I think that's a big part of socialization, right? Is that we just learn these skills of like learning how to speak and learning how to communicate, and you see that you can kind of develop these narratives. And you kind of put your spin on it. And you kind of learn the power of your voice and of perspective. And I think largely I just fell in love with that. I was surrounded by good stories growing up, and surrounded by what I like to think are great people who could tell stories anyway. I come from a Jamaican family, raised by my mom. And her cackling with her sisters and her brothers. I mean, just being around that and not understanding it, but just wanting to be around it so much and be immersed in those tales of being back home and just how they interacted was really cool. And I was like, I can do something like that. I can, and eventually, and I would say that I'm also a little bit of an introvert as well, for whatever that's worth. But seeing that I can, even from a young age, I could sort of create these worlds around me that made it easier to navigate my, actual surroundings. That was big and that was huge. And I just started to develop that, further.
Who did you notice were some of the people that really encouraged you along the way? That seems to be such a paramount thing.
Well, I think anyone who reads my stories will see that there are very strong maternal themes. So for sure, like my mom, I mean, it's taken like some of those things you don't even associate with writing to write. Like one of my favorite memories is growing up, and this was around the time, was like, I want to be a writer. She would spend so much time with me after work and after getting us, some food, just helping me practice for spelling tests. Like that was our big thing. And she'd kind of it'd be like game show style. I'd be on the couch and just kind of like, all right, what's the next word? And she'd give it to me, and we kind of had a little system going. We had treats set up, if I got something right. So I was the best speller, in my elementary school for sure, just because she took the time to do that. So I'm sure that impacted a ton, the way that I like see writing in general, and the persistence of just like figuring out how to say things and weaving them into, a tale of sorts.
Now, how important? Now, everybody's different. Like I say, I write as well. I always feel like, even now at 40, so I'm 8 years old, I feel like I'm 46, y'all. It doesn't matter. Even though I got these, these icicles in my. I always feel like my vocabulary is not enough. I want to expand my vocabulary. When I learn a new word, I'm like, I'm going to use this word. And it was like we talked about, like I remember first time I heard Pastor Billy use the word catastrophize. I was like, that is my word
for the week, for the month,
I'm using that because it describes so many things, so many people. When I can throw it out, but I think that's one of the amazing things about literature and writing and language. So, but for your mom, that's dope. Anybody, any parents that are watching, that's just amazing. For your mom to make it a celebratory event. Now, people to enter spelling bees, that's a normal thing. But for your mom to make it a celebratory event for you to learn words, did that turn into, is that something that still excites you? Because there's so many words we never run out. So is that something that still excites you, the finding words to use while you're writing? Or do you kind of take your writing to a place of it really staying right there wherever your character is, to keep it real? Like, do you find a way to interchange your vocabulary with your writing properly?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of that. I think that, the question kind of becomes, what is effective as voice versus, specific usage. So style of the writer versus, well, does this call for that as like the narrator voice, the narrative voice, or your character's voice, what have you. So that's, at least my short answer is like, what is more effective here if we're workshopping the story. But yeah, I mean, I love words. I love language. I love linguistics. I'm an English major. So there's certainly this like, base fascination of like a word and how you use it and how it's contextualized, how it's conjugated to create a whole other meaning and a whole other, context and way of understanding for an idea, for a character, or for, an overall story. So that, I think, utilizing that truly as a tool and as a weapon, more than just putting it down page, I think is definitely a part of growth as a writer, and something I try to be more cognizant of, the further along I get, in writing and my storytelling. I'm 30 now, so I love where I can kind of see this. And grad school was kind of like this. It was, undergrad was like, let's just get the mechanics down. Let's get the nitty gritty of storytelling down and make sure you can just kind of be up to the task. Grad school oftentimes is like, defend your writing, develop your voice, but this is how you see the world. This is how you see your stories. Stand behind it and keep going. And as I'm doing more stories and things like that, I can kind of see that. And I think you become kind of unapologetic about it. But at the same time, you're also see that there is certainly a path for growth, even within the voice that you are discovering, for your writing.
I think that's funny because I think that's what every artist, we try to. There are certain rules when I think about comedy. There was some, learn how to write a joke, learn the setup, the punchline, the act out, whatever it's going to be. Learn the dynamics of timing and all that stuff, and then find your voice, your niche. So it's amazing that most people in the art form, in any art form, even in sports, know the basics, know the formulas, know the basics, and then find your performance voice. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
let's dive in a little bit.
It's powerful.
Yeah, let's dive in a little bit. I want to Chalkboard. Where did you come up with the concept, and what, without giving the book away, what is the book about?
So I'll say this, that in like academia, it's interesting because there seems to be a trend where a big part of writing, a part that you get to is write what you know. And that can be true or untrue in a lot of cases, depending how far you get with storytelling. But it's certainly a helpful sort of space or season to be in to just learn how to tell your story. And part of that wisdom is like everyone has a story because your story is being told through you. This is how you live. So everyone has their own story they can tell. That's where that comes from. So I always kind of like scoffed at that a little bit in undergrad. It's like, it feels kind of like a cop out to just kind of write about your sort of your current experiences, as you're going through college, as you're going through the motions. But if I was forced to be a little more honest about it, those were some of the more powerful narratives that we had to workshop. Some of those students like brought like real fire with those stories. And so strangely, when I was out after grad school and figuring out like what I want my project to be, and we kind of work on a manuscript, for the course of our education, and then we look to publish it. But since that happened, everything had kind of transformed. So I was kind of staring at the face of, or on the page of like, this is something brand new, and I would want to do something that just felt better about what I was doing, during school. So Chalkboard Specials kind of turned into my unofficial sort of biography or autobiography of like my time at school, but with a certain sort of like bend to it, because it is not me. Even though my wife is like, "That's you," all those things. Like, no, it's not. It's not. It's certainly inspired by me, but so it was really just kind of memorializing that those 4 years of undergrad and where I was at the start and where I was at the finish, and how food kind of played an interesting part of that, especially for the character for Vern Thompson. So what was cool was the structuring, and I was happy that my first publisher was like, "Yeah, we dig this. We think it's awesome." Because I was like, "Oh, this is weird, but this is how I see the story." And so every year we only get the prose, or we get the story in which Vern is in between every school year of college, and in that time he's like kind of his sort of anxieties and his growth and his various musings are kind of framed by like a new sort of food obsession that he's into. So the first chapter kind of finds him in between high school graduation and starting college. It's that summer. So every kind of chapter is like each summer before he's going into a new school year. And so we see him kind of like trying to like, oh, what am I doing here? Like, this is a huge new chapter. Like, how do I cope? And he's coping through chicken wings. That's like his big thing. So it's just a fun way to, frame and I just think I'm a sucker for coming of age as like a subgenre to like fiction or as a mode of prose. And I thought it was such a great way to show not only growth through the perspective of someone who just like sees you as like, oh, a year has passed and you look different, like what's going on there. But you can kind of see it in that sort of the subtlety, I would hope, or in the restraint of like, well, I'm not going to give you everything, but I will show you that like I am different because I like to eat different food now. Where I'm like kind of in this different like food kick. And this is how we kind of see him turning into a man and growing into, someone who, is living a life and certainly faith plays a part in that in the first book and how that also impacts his growth.
What's so awesome about that? I tell people, being foodies, you ask people, you never had a foodgasm? It's like, no, I never had you've never bit something and said, oh,
yeah.
Oh, it made some noise, some weird noise. Was the original food gas. Good. Camel soup. Good. That was the original food gas. Any noise you make of ecstasy with food. So I was talking to a friend of mine, and they mentioned that she didn't have any good memories around food. see how sad the logic is.
It's almost a sympathetic, it's like, oh man.
And I know you come up from the Caribbean and like, so, dinner's ready, a certain call. And I just remember the only thing that I don't like is liver. Nothing. I can cook the hell out of some liver.
Yeah.
But onions, fried liver and onions, I can smother it. I can do whatever you want to it. Only a couple times where liver was with like maybe a wine sauce, because liver does what liver does, it takes it in. But depending on what kind of liver, but when you're talking about beef liver, a big piece of liver, and like folks used to eat to get all that iron and all that. That's the only thing that I can't get around the taste of it. But other than that, a good meal is, so I love the fact that you said spacing life with something that people, food, as you grow, your palate changes.
Right.
That's pretty awesome, because I talk about, someone was talking about, oh, you want beer or wine and this and another. And one point in time, I was like, yeah, give me a Guinness dark stout. Now Jason's like, it's not the same. Give me something light to go with that meal. And I love it. If I'm drinking it, your palate changes. What you can handle and not handle changes. So I love that concept. I love that the way you parallel that.
It was a cool project that turned into like, oh, was this like a weird prompt or challenge? But it was the best sort of vehicle to kind of tell this story. And to really just kind of like show, hence the Chalkboard name, like there is this motif of like construction and something kind of always having the scaffolding around it. But that usually kind of means growth. There's going to be some growth here. So I think it's cool the way that I write about food and food literature now. I think it's fascinating that a friend would kind of not have these vivid or at least, great memories surrounding food. But I think that's still compelling as a story because, Nasty Business gets into how food can affect your mood and how it can change it, even in that moment, how it can stop you from doing something that you never thought you would ever think that food could do, as a powerful tool to make you change your mind. So, but we do that. I mean, being hangry, being kind of like famished, it's just, those were always real things. Food does so much.
Feminist studies.
Yeah.
I'm learning that about my daughter. I mean, sometimes I was like, what's wrong? Nothing.
Right.
And she knows nothing like that is a cuss word to me. So I'm like, what'd you say?
Blood sugar's a little low.
Nothing. So all the tea. Why are you smiling? And I was like, and I hate asking it because I was like, are you hungry? Yes.
Did you use the Snickers? That's how those
commercials. She uses the word angry and emotions amazing.
Right.
But all right, let's a little bit about the nasty business of a bodyguard. You said something key, because as soon as you said that, I started thinking, and let me reverse a little bit, because it was amazing something you said earlier. The homage to write what you know. And it's funny because it's been shown that our brain jumps into the other 90% that we don't talk about it uses when we function in imagination and when we assertively go towards things that we have never done. When we fall in love. Because we start adjusting our mental to focus and flow with someone who is not us. So our brain, the other 90% of the brain, starts going wild. So it's funny to say, well, write what you know, but we don't know what we know until we start.
Right.
Because the brain is an awesome tool. It will pull stuff that you thought you saw at a glance. There was a movie called Limitless with Bradley Cooper. You saw when he thing that triggered. So he said, did I know that? Oh yeah, that's right. I saw this book, the side thing, and I must have saw a page, and my mind is amazing. So I think it's awesome that you were able to open your mind up. And I want the writers to really hear this. Open your mind up to go down a path to tell a story you were kind of familiar with, but then to use something like food. And it took you, as a writer, you kind of let, the best writing to me is when you let the pen and let the story take you. Don't be so scared to the structure. Structure, but you're finding a voice. So you drifted and went to the next. Did you already have the nasty business of a bodyguard in mind when you were doing Chalk, or was something that came up later? When did you come up with that concept?
Yeah, for me, and understanding every writer is different. The next project usually comes to me in the middle of the current one. So yeah, Nasty Business came along. As I might have mentioned, it was kind of inspired loosely by a comedic bit that Kyle Kinane, who I love as a comedian, had about just kind of like, and this was like 2016. Trump had just gotten elected and things were crazy. But he had this interesting bit where it's just like, I wonder if like if the clan had a chef and they were a chef and they were loyal to that way more than they were loyal to their role in the clan, how they would probably have the worst time trying to introduce the rest of the group to like ethnic food, which that person would love, which the chef would love, but would have the hardest time trying to. And so, yeah, you can see how it was just very funny, very humorous. It was a cool way to kind of like talk about this very serious thing that was going on in the midst of just like really good joke structure. So that had me going for a second. I was like, oh yeah, that would be interesting to kind of like at least frame, the person who had like the very close, like inside sort of perspective, the person who's left of center, but has such a privileged viewpoint to like the big goings on and nasty business was kind of born from that. But I did want to, the big challenge was kind of keeping it in that mode of like funny, because I think to me, it's sort of inherently humorous that like this chef would kind of take on this like almost, double secret agent role, but be loyal to the food at the end of the day and use that as much as they could as like a superhero would with like a superhuman ability of some sort. So then the crime drama aspect kind of came into it, and how much the unlikely sort of detective or secret agent could be a chef of all people. And then I got a bunch of traction from there. I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's go for it. So,
so what's the biggest joy when you write? Is it the process or the finished product?
Finished product's pretty great. I don't know any writers that's like, I hate this. I'm sure all of us are like, okay, phew, all right, it's done, at least for now. I would say as part of the process, I just love creating a world. Like that's been the coolest part, is creating this universe with these rules and, these conditions and these citizens of, the planet, if you will. But yeah, really just creating a universe in which, you can kind of write the rules. But because you are writing the rules, you're also kind of a scientist in which, these rules certainly have consequences because the characters are either going against or going within these rules. So what happens there? And that's kind of where the story kind of takes place. So it's really just kind of, I think making these weird scientific experiments in a lot of ways of just like, I'm setting this up. I'm setting, you throw plot and, developments and characters at these rules. How do they react to it, on both sides?
Well, you said you're working on, I don't know if it's third book or third and fourth. Now, have you ever?
Both. Yeah. I mean, these days that's like, I'm a writer, I'm an author, that's my job. So, I think at this point there's so many things in development, which is cool. So yeah, to your point, I love comic books. It's a big first love, as I've told Troy. I want to try my hand at it eventually. So
now, for the people who are, and I'm speaking to writers. Some people are just, they're readers and they're probably like, okay, I got the site elijahd.writing.com. I'm going to get the books. But for the writer, and you said another thing key to those who love to write or they know they want to write, and you said, this is what I do full time. How did you come to that? And of course, your job probably gave you some leeway in 2020, but how did you get to the point, or how long did it take you to get to the point? What was the process getting to the point where I am a full-time writer? Writing is my thing. I know responsibility, writing is my thing. Let me get in it. How do you get to that rhythm, that place, that comfort level, if there is one?
Yeah. I think a lot of us kind of intuitively know what that is. If you're serious about, writing, I think a lot of us see ourselves as writers. The problem is that we're not getting paid for it, or the world just kind of hasn't given us that opportunity. But for me, at least, the posture of like, well, this is what I've gone to school for. This is what I've always wanted to do. I see myself as a writer before anything else. Like, I have a day job. Even if I had a couple day jobs or whatever, I'm an author, when I wake up, and I'm an author when I go to sleep. I just happen to do this other thing, in the daytime. So, that certainly has a lot of practical ramifications of like, well, I have to do my day job. I work at a film studio, so I have to do that. And then I have homework. That's my writing. Thankfully, the pandemic has made it so I'm at home, and I, can kind of shorten that sort of all the transition times of like, you need to do work stuff or get ready for work stuff, and just put that into writing. So really, as a priority, that's kind of been the focal point, or the mission, is adjusting and doing all these things. But like at the end of the day, my writing is gonna get time, and get time every day until I finish that project or what have you. So it's a lifestyle thing, but it's really seeing yourself as an author before anything else. And in addition to that, which I think we were kind of touching on, is being, a voracious reader. You can be a writer in more than one way, and that certainly sort of entails, I think, leaning into your peers and your contemporaries and reading what they have, getting inspired, seeing what works, what doesn't work, really learning the art form, and also just being a consumer of it. I really do believe, great writers, good writers are pretty, good readers. And again, there's no surefire track to do anything. A million people can probably disagree with that, and I'm sure a lot of great writers don't read as much because they don't have time. But since I was 6, I've had to just kind of give myself over to storytelling and be inspired by it.
So how that's key, because it's hard. I think sometimes it's hard for me to write if I'm reading certain things, depending where my mind is.
Yeah.
And depending on what I'm writing.
You don't want to be too impressionable.
Well, as fiction, it's hard for me to read fiction if I'm writing fiction.
Mm.
But as far as nonfiction, I can, that's what is how did that work? Have you ever read something and you said, I can do this story better, or you read something and said they should have went here, and then it got your wheels, because from what you said, it gets your wheels turning, and you're like, yeah, I'd like to do something like this. So that's what you get inspired by reading.
Right. And I think the interesting divide, funny enough, is, as much as I've been and learning how to write in school, there are certain books that I would read that, like, I'm kind of scientific about it. Like, I see what they're going for, the devices they're using, I see the author before I see the story. Those can still be good reads and still be helpful. But I think the ones that like make me forget about like, oh, I don't know anything. Like, they just kind of wreck me in terms of like how seamless everything was of just being a great, just awesome, super, amazing novel or read, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. I think those are the ones that can still inspire, and I can still kind of get something from. And, kind of influence me, down the line, drop those seeds of just like, this is kind of what led to this story in a lot of ways. I was telling a mentor the other day, because he was reading Nasty Biz. It was like, I happened to be one of my big shows when I was watching Nasty Biz was Fargo, because I loved the movie, but they, FX adapted into a really amazing series. And I'm pretty sure, and for me, it was kind of a masterclass how they could do something so serious as what they were doing, which was like a crime drama, but the comedy that was in it, the dark comedy that was weaved so well into it, I think definitely influenced a lot of Nasty Biz in a lot of ways. So hopefully I was a bit, I was using it, but was a lot more subtle about it. I think that whether we kind of make it so or not, or we kind of impose it in our art or not, I think the things that matter and things that inspire us make their way into what we create anyway,
Right. I think it happened to me. I remember they came out with the show Dexter. I was like, who would watch a show about a serial killer?
Yeah.
This just doesn't, that's kind of creepy. And I did some extra work on Dexter. I was doing the Skinner series. It was a crime guy called Skinner. He was a landscaper. So they needed some people to dress up as day laborers and you bring in all these day laborers into the station and stuff, and it was cool set, cool people. I said, oh, let me see if I can find the episode, and I went and started watching it to see if I could find the episode, and got hooked. And it's because of that. They have one out now, a show out now. We see the billboard in Hollywood. It's like the ladies dressed like the Stepford Wives, and she's got blood on her scissors, and she's like, "What is happening here?"
Yeah.
And you hear about those. It's the flow of life, and crazy enough, a lot of the hit movies that get Oscars and all this crazy stuff have this weird spin on stuff that's like, if you think of American Beauty, it's like it's kind of a
right.
movie. They won the Oscar. They were like,
they could take that one back these days. Yeah.
Right. You know what I'm saying? So those are the things that pull people in, because like the story Fargo, those are things that pull people in. They're a little off. They're a little off keel, and our minds are made to solve problems. So if all of a sudden we can't figure. That's why I think that's why people watch movie theater, especially you can if this is women, because women will tell you, oh, I figured it out. No, but I know what's going to happen. No, let's just watch it.
Yeah.
Oh, I got it. So, but if you can and take somebody's mind another way, I think that's the thing that pulls them into your story. If they don't know where it's going and you got them, once you get somebody on that, what are some of the things? And I'll definitely make sure everybody has all the information and definitely gets their first 2 books and looks out for the next one. But what are some of the things that you've heard, we talked about Goodreads, from people who read your book, that some responses that kind of shocked you, but the good ones, not the bad ones, like, oh man, this sound like such and such and such and such. Like, what are some of the good responses you got that kind of shocked you that wasn't your intent in the book, but it moved people away?
So I guess I'll start with how my presence in workshops in undergrad and a bit of grad school was Elijah is like uber creative, very creative mind for the stuff that he creates, which can be a compliment, which is cool. But sometimes, and I had to sort of grow from this, sometimes that kind of can create, a very wacky story that's kind of hard to attach yourself to. You read it, you kind of see what's happening. You can see where things are going. You might not see everything, but like, oh, this is like a very creative world that you've seemed to have formulated. So I think part of my growth was, oh, that's probably always gonna be me, especially with like the food kind of like frame that I keep putting on my stories now. But how can I create something that's compelling where you attach yourself emotionally to the story and to the characters? And I think that I'm starting to get to that sweet spot, because I think that's what you would want readers to attach themselves to anyways, to get emotionally involved in what they're reading. Even trashy literature, what's considered trashy literature, to an extent, like you're in it. Like I'm there with those guys. Like I need to know what's happening next, way beyond like the pacing and whatnot. So I think that readers have awesomely sort of responded to like, okay, this is cool, and I can kind of see what you were going for. But way more than that, the main character is like the least interesting character in the book. And so for Nasty Business, the two most forefront characters, prominent characters, is the main character Alvin Gates, who's the chef, and then Coco, who is the sort of foil, and I call her the like Joker to Alvin's Batman, if you will. So kind of the very close nemesis, but they share such an interesting and deep relationship that goes beyond just like hero and enemy, or like friend and foe. And Coco actually ends up being my favorite character. To both right, she wasn't the main character. And I think from what it seems like, a lot of the readers have also responded positively, like, oh, Coco's got it. Like she's the villain, she's the antagonist, but I think we kind of love her a bit more. So I guess mission accomplished, because that may be my my like loyalties or biases kind of like frame that at the end of the day. Though I would hope that Alvin is still a effective vehicle for telling the story. But yeah, that's been a surprise, just kind of seeing how like, oh, I didn't see that coming at all. Like there's certainly like a big sort of climax in the middle that kind of changes how the book is sort of read for the latter half of it. And she's
we don't want to give too much away, but
right. Hopefully that's enough to entice you a little bit.
But that's now, does that turn into kind of a blessing, whereas you can all of a sudden do a spin-off with her character, with Coco?
What's
people ask, where's the line? Is it like, because I've seen authors and they sit down, they're talking to people, it's like, oh man, I really wish you would have did it, and author's like, yeah, but she died.
Right.
And the author's like, versus listening and saying, hey, this is your audience.
Yeah.
If you get a certain amount of ladies saying, man, Coco, 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 does that kind of pull you, just like most movie people, if they want to make the money off of it? Or is it strictly the art? Do you think of going back to any of your stories and writing more off of those, or are they strictly one-offs?
Yeah, so it's literary criticism, film criticism would tell us that these stories kind of live on way beyond the scope of what the author originally intended, as they're kind of supposed to. They kind of take on a life of their own. So it's something that you should hopefully leave a lot of room for. To me, there is that like kind of snooty artist is like, no, I can't do a sequel. Granted, if like the right sort of album is like, well, we'll give you this advance for, it's like, yeah, sure, I'll do a 1 hour.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, as it stands, I think that it's best told in its singularity. So it probably will be the one-off. But yeah, Coco can certainly still live on in infamy, beyond this story and how people can talk about it. Yeah.
I love it. All right. Yeah. Elijah Douresseau. All right. Let everybody know how to get in touch with you. Also, folks, the information for the book links will be below, and the YouTube link. Also, when you check it out, and click the link in the bio if you're on the IG, and you can check out the entirety of the video and the interview. And we're going to chop it up some more, but I want to hear the process of, I love this conversation, because it's good to hear the entire process from, because author's concerned, you're still a young author, to have 2 books out and your process, and being that you went through school and you have such a love for the art form, and you went to school. Sometimes you find people in any art form, you get to a certain place and they may be bitter, they may be more critical, but you can tell you have a love for the process of writing and putting out the books and putting out your stories. And thank you took a minute to really give people some insight on some key things that you've learned throughout your years and throughout, scholastic piece and things you're learning in the process. So let people know how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's I'm in a couple places. So you can get the book or the books on my website. Amazon is also where they're sold as a platform. I'm usually interfacing with like fans or different, usually having conversations with other authors and things like that on Twitter. I'm also a diehard Clippers fan, so you probably will see a lot of tweets on that front as well. But also on Facebook, I have a page on Facebook. So pretty much all the platforms, and on the food front, I share a food blogging account with my wife on Instagram, so you can also see the active, very present food adventures that we're getting into. But yeah, I mean it's. I think as writers grow, you kind of end up being these unofficial ambassadors for just telling stories that you keep wanting to tell that you don't feel like have been told yet, certainly from your perspective. But it's just like, I just kind of want to be better about telling stories that involve Los Angeles and its foodscape, very heavily. And that also involves its people and its, its laws and everything that has to do with it. So they're very local books that I think are love letters to California and Los Angeles and a lot of places and my family growing up here. So that's all I just want to do is just tell stories about where I come from, I guess. Yeah.
Well, it's exciting. Cop the books. get the books. We gotta set up like we might have to do like a book club Zoom scenario with some different authors. Also, we'll talk more. We got the Love, Life, and Literature conference is coming up. We'd love to have you on board for that. So we'll talk more about that too. And you guys go to ElijahD.writing.com.
Yes.
ElijahD.writing.com. That'll be below as well. And check out Elijah Douresseau and all his books. His books, his writings, what's coming up. And thank you, brother, for taking time out.
Of course, no. Thanks for having me. Like I was telling Troy, I'm a fan of this platform. It's cool seeing the people that he's interviewing, and they're cool people in my life. So I just keep the good content coming, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you. That means a lot more than you know. I appreciate it. And we'll continue the conversation offline, and you guys can catch. You won't be able to catch the conversation online. It's between me and him. And we don't have that yet. It's coming soon. You know, like Oprah or somebody. You're like, you can catch the conversation offline on another time. Elijah Douresseau, thanks so much, brother. Talk to you soon.
All right. Take care, Troy.
Peace.